Hawatlo, my name is David Cobb. I use he, him pronouns. I'm coming at you from Jarajiji, also known as a good place to stop and rest in Salatlook or Eureka, California. And I am very excited to be introducing this panel. This panel is a presentation by the Green Eco-Socialist Network on non-reformist reforms. The Green Eco-Socialist Network is a group of mostly Green Party members that are committed to building the Green Party itself into a functional, explicitly eco-socialist political party that is serious about taking and exercising state power and using it to help facilitate the end of capitalism and the creation of an eco-socialist society. I'm going to pass it to my dear friend and colleague and comrade, Margaret Kimberley. She is the executive director, the executive editor of the Black Agenda Report, a longtime social change agent, and a good friend. Margaret, welcome.
Thank you, David, and everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. As David said, I'm Margaret Kimberley. I'm a member of the Green Eco-Socialist Network Interim Steering Committee. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm going to be talking about non-reformist reforms. And of course, I'll start by defining what that means. Non-reformist reforms are those that don't just help us survive under capitalism, they actually help empower working people in material ways and help to pave the way for more transformative change. The idea was developed by the Austrian-French thinker André Gorz in developing the idea that through the use of non-reformist reforms, social movements could make immediate gains and build strength for a wider struggle, eventually culminating in revolutionary change. A certain type of reforms, in other words, could herald greater transformations to come. And here are some of the most prominent examples. The first is government support for worker-owned, producer-owned cooperatives. Studies show that on average, worker-owned cooperatives outperform traditional businesses in terms of average wages and benefits, productivity, job stability, and job satisfaction. Worker co-ops are locally rooted and prioritize benefiting the communities in which they're located. Unlike private corporate employers, worker co-ops are unlikely to leave for greener, that is to say, more profitable pastures. As owners, workers have the power to take measures to stay safe. For example, during the pandemic, or safe from industrial accidents. And the spillover effect is that workers who run their own business are, of course, going to be more civically involved. They'll have a stronger degree of civic engagement. Another example are community land trusts. CLTs. CLTs decommodify land and housing by taking them out of the speculative market, thereby creating permanently affordable housing. They enable low and moderate income individuals and families to either own their own home or to be assured of having housing that's permanently affordable, even if they don't own it. And they provide long-term land leases at a nominal cost. There's a lower rate of foreclosures, obviously, than there is in conventional housing. Generally, a CLT is a nonprofit, and usually at least 30% of their board members are community residents, and so it ensures democratic and community control. Energy democracy, it can mean various things and look different in different places. Capitalizing on decentralizing the potential for renewable energy resources. Energy democracy transfers control over the energy economy to communities and stakeholders through community-based public entities or co-ops. And by democratizing and decarbonizing the energy economy, local renewable energy systems make it possible to share the benefits of moving off fossil fuels, can channel energy assets, employment opportunities, and cost savings to disadvantaged communities where they're most needed, reversing histories of dispossessions and other inequities. And it requires institutional, social, and economic innovation. And that means the business as usual practices are avoided, and we'll see a more just and sustainable future. Public banking. Public bank is operated in the public interest, owned by the people through representative governments. And they're a way to democratize public financial decisions. They can be used to finance some of the things we discussed, climate change solutions or co-ops. They can make low interest loans for affordable housing, local businesses, student loans, any public purpose. Public banks can reduce taxes. Their profits are returned to the general fund, and they don't need to charge interest. And eliminating interest can reduce the cost of many of the public projects that we depend on. Participatory budgeting ensures that all voices have a place at the table, allows participants to work together for the community good, and increasing government accountability. Participatory budgeting makes government more effective and fair, connects residents' local knowledge and local interests with technical expertise, and directs resources toward the greatest public good. Low-income people, people of color, youth participate at higher rates than they do in typical elections, and as a result, learn skills about civic engagement, and creates new projects that push for broader policy change. Here in New York City, where I live now, all members of the City Council 51 are required to have participatory budgeting for capital projects. And at least one project will be one that's funded, will be one that's chosen by the public. Universal basic income. It's very obvious how that would benefit the people serving working class people by reducing and potentially eliminating poverty. The official rate of poverty is always low. It's a figure that can't be trusted, usually between 10 and 15%. But it's generally agreed that the more realistic numbers is about 40% of people in this country living in poverty or near poverty. It could help obviously address so many things, because we have an ongoing mass displacement of labor from productive and gainful employment, from living wage work into the ranks of the unemployed or the underemployed. Computerization, automation, robotics eliminate what remains of the industrial and even some service employment. So obviously there are not enough jobs that pay people enough money to live. People are being consigned to guard labor, the gig economy, or other marginal employment that keeps them in poverty. And the idea is very simple. We say this is the wealthiest nation in the world. It's a strange term to me. If I don't know what it means to say the wealthiest nation if people are struggling, but it guarantees a floor for everybody, ensuring economic security and well-being. And it's a very straightforward means. It would allow government to eliminate, the concept of means testing and trying to decide which struggling person deserves help and which one would not. And but we do have to be careful. UBI should not be used to reduce in any way the public assistance programs we already have. And it's very obvious, there are people who struggle so much that they are unable to do anything but survive. And so while we want to encourage people to be involved, to be civically engaged, and not just to vote, we don't see that as the definition of civic engagement, but to allow people to do more than just struggle to survive. Allowing for greater options in employment, allowing people to refuse jobs that are dangerous, or jobs that they just don't want, that are very difficult to do, or to accept a job that doesn't pay as much, because there would be a guarantee of support. A real UBI program would have helped us the last couple of years during the COVID pandemic, instead of having these paltry stimulus checks, allowing people to stay home if they were unable to work, to stay home if they're sick, and not forcing anybody to work under unsafe conditions. I am going to, drum roll, give an example of one of the programs I described, and that's community land trusts, that and how they work here in New York, where I live. So let's see if I can successfully share my screen. Okay, hold on just a second. Almost there. Okay. Okay. Okay, cool. Community land trust, which we, as I'm about to say, we have many of here in New York. It's a special problem that we have here in New York with housing affordability, with so many people being rent burdened. And I have some statistics here showing how many, and many New Yorkers, while many New Yorkers are homeowners, many also depend on rental housing. And a large number of people are defined as rent burdened, just not making enough money to pay for their homes. The earnings differentials, as can be seen elsewhere, are seen in housing, where people of color, Black and Latino families are the most rent burdened, Asians a little less, and white people less. And this chart shows you rent affordability by race in each borough. But basically you could see, just if you look at the first column, the median asking rent is more than most people make in all 5 boroughs of the city. And only Staten Island has the least amount of rent burden, but there's rent burden all over the city. And we'll see some of the reasons why. And there are community land trusts, many of them in New York. We have them in every borough. Manhattan has the most, well, slightly more than the Bronx, but every single borough has a community land trust. And we can see there's a big problem here with tax lien sales. The city forecloses on abandoned property, and now the city gets upfront cash. And then the investors take on the responsibility of collecting the money. So the city sells the lien on a small building, and then they make a lot of money. And this is not something, quite obviously, that helps the average person, and we will see why. This photo is in Brooklyn, neighborhood of Crown Heights, and it shows it's typical housing in that part of the city. And the building on the attached building on the right was sold in a tax lien sale. And it could be, and it's probably going to go to an affluent person or family. But as you can see, it could be 4 units of housing in a community which needs affordable housing so badly. And this,
Hey, Margaret.
yes,
We're getting some feedback, and I was going to maybe try doing mute all to narrow it down, and then you can unmute, and hopefully that'll narrow down the source of the static. So,
okay,
do you mind if I try that real quick, and then?
sure.
Okay, great. It looks like it's gone. So,
Oh, okay,
okay.
sorry.
Oh
Well,
no, you're fine.
apologizing. It's like,
Yeah. All right,
um,
go right ahead.
okay, cool. Thank you, Michael. So these are tax lien sales. They're mostly in the so-called outer boroughs of Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, where there are lower income families and more families of color. So this is the same building, and this is a tweet from a city council member, Carlina Rivera. She represents the Lower East Side, and she speaks of the need to stop the tax lien sales and give community land trust. She's actually working on legislation that would make it easy. The city would fund more community land trusts and increase the possibility of preserving affordable housing. So this is an example. This is East New York in Brooklyn. It's the easternmost part of Brooklyn. And this is how an example of housing speculation. So this house sold for $420,000 in 2018 and 1.23 million in 2021. And it's an example of housing being out of reach for people because we don't have the right public policies in place. Okay, and here we have a building that was abandoned, and the tax lien sales give this to developers and take them out of the housing market. And as you can see, there's a lot of units there that could go to the public. And so there have been many plans to encourage getting rid of the tax lien sales and prioritizing community land trusts. So there is a bill called COPA, Community Opportunity to Purchase, which gives CLTs an opportunity to purchase and to the ability to submit offers. So they're not just pushed out by developers, and would require city agencies to give priority to CLTs. And they would have the opportunity to submit offers and match any competing offers, so that you don't have the situation you have now where developers get everything. The city is beginning to support CLTs. They've given money in the current fiscal year budget, $1.5 million to support 14 different groups and to provide legal and technical assistance to get them off the ground. So here we have some success stories. East Harlem, El Barrio Community Land Trust to transform affordable apartments in a partnership with New York City. The city provides tax exemptions, a capital subsidy, transferring title to the trust, and the CLT will enter into a 99-year lease with the city, and housing people who make as little as $36,000 a year, which is not enough to live in New York. And some of the housing will go to formerly unhoused people. So to sum up, this is a great example of green eco-socialism, social ownership, production geared to meet human needs, decisions being made democratically, ending the impacts of racism and all forms of oppression, and ending top-down power, where people are or industries are privileged because they have more money, and decision-making being made democratically that that benefits the people. So I will stop there, and thank you very much. I'll be ready to answer questions and discuss. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Margaret. So I think that brings it up to me. And so we're moving from the broad to the specific here in this panel presentation, which I'm so thankful to all of you for joining. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can insert these ideas and these potentially transformative measures that Margaret has just been explaining into electoral spaces and ideally into the actual halls of power. My name is Michael O'Neill. I'm also a member of the Green Eco-Socialist Network Interim Steering Committee, and I am a longtime comrade of David Cobb, and very honored and happy to be here and presenting at this conference. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a candidate questionnaire, which is a really simple tool which has some actually powerful potentials in terms of its ability to change or shape the debate in the actual elections going on in your communities right now. I do a lot of work in electoral spaces, but actually for the first 10 years of my work in politics, I was much more in the radical street movement, protest movement space. And where my heart is the moment when the brilliant transformative ideas that our movements and our comrades and cadre have been dreaming up and shaping actually enter into those spaces that are, for lack of a better term, normal life, right? Or the normal news cycle, getting an idea that has only been talked about in collective backroom spaces on the front page of the newspaper or on the televised debate for Congress or governor in your community. And so this candidate questionnaire I'm going to talk about is one way to get candidates who are running for office in your area on the record about where they stand, or at least what their interests are regarding some of the non-reformist reforms that Margaret has just been talking about. So what is a candidate questionnaire? Well, I'm going to show instead of telling, and to do that I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and I'm right now showing you a live candidate questionnaire that's on the U.S. Solidarity Economy Network website, and that is at ussen.org, and you can find it in the resources section of the website. So if you go to the navigation section, you go to resources, and then SE candidate questionnaire. And it's a questionnaire that we pose to the candidates. And we have some guidelines for how we use a tool like this that I'm going to go over in a moment. But the gist of it is we have a structured form that explains the ideas and the questions that we're asking about those ideas to the candidates. Where do they stand on something like community land trusts or worker-owned co-ops or community energy democracy or universal basic income or public banking. It briefly lays out those issues and then asks the candidate to state their position on each of them. And so a tool like this, if you are working in the context of a community group that is incorporated as a charitable organization that is tax exempt, where donations to your organization are tax deductible, then you want to be careful about ensuring that you distribute this questionnaire to all candidates who are running in the election and ensure each candidate has equal opportunity and time to respond. So if you are circulating this on behalf of your 501c3 tax deductible qualifying community group or issue group, don't just send this to the candidate that you really like. Send it to all of the candidates who are running for that position in that election. And also keep in mind that you can and should circulate this questionnaire and other candidate questionnaires, because I would love to see 1,000 radical candidate questionnaires bloom as a result of this work. Circulate it in primaries in addition to the general election. Get those candidates on the record who are running in primaries. But like I said, if you are working in a 501c3 tax exempt context, make sure you're distributing it equally. You only want to distribute this official questionnaire page, and this is also the page through which candidates and campaigns submit their answers. This is a Google form, and so they submit their answers here. That way we know all answers are going to the right place, they're not going to get lost, and we want to make sure that all candidates are answering the same questions, that they're not being modified or distorted inadvertently or on purpose. And then you want to make sure that campaigns know that their responses to the questionnaire will be posted verbatim. We're not going to be proofreading or anything like that for them. And if a campaign realizes that they submitted a typo or an error of another kind, they can contact USN as the host of this Solidarity Economy candidate questionnaire and submit a correction. And so by circulating this handy-dandy URL, you can either on behalf of yourself as an individual or on behalf of the group that you're working with, circulate this, making sure that you give candidates plenty of time to answer the questionnaire and that we have plenty of time to publish their answers online in time before voting starts, which in many places is before election day, right? Because we have early voting, we have mail-in voting. So we want to get candidates on the record answers out there before people are actually casting their ballots. So I think at this point, I want to touch on why this can be a powerful tool in elections for city council, county executive, county legislature, state legislature, governor. And believe me, it does scale through all of those levels of government. The way these questions have been very intelligently framed by the drafters, there's something that someone who's running for city council will have to say or should have something to say about these issues, all the way up to someone who's running for governor or other statewide office. And as I've mentioned, it gets candidates on the record. And because these will be published, and then you can then circulate the answers that candidates have given. And if you're circulating all of the answers that all of the candidates have given, or maybe you're just focused on one issue, but if you're circulating the answer that all of the candidates have given on that issue, that is a way for you to engage in voter education that, again, if you're in a 501c3 tax deductible context, you're not electioneering. You're not engaging in what could be considered partisan speech that would jeopardize your 501c3 tax deductible charitable status, because you're just talking about what all of the candidates have said on the record. But it's a way for your constituents who care about these issues to know what those candidates have said and what the differences are, and whether or not those answers are in the interests of your community. Now, if you are not working on behalf of a tax deductible 501c3 charitable organization, if you're just engaging on your own behalf, or if you're in it with an unincorporated organization, or if you're in an organization that has a partisan arm that is able to engage in strictly partisan politics, then go ahead and, if you want, to just send this to the candidate or candidates that you know are strong on these issues, and you want to make sure that their positions on these issues are on the record and publicized. But I would encourage that you pressure all of the candidates to answer it and let them know which other candidates have answered it and have been willing to go on the record. And if a candidate refuses to answer the questionnaire, make a point of that in your community. Let them know that they're not willing to disclose their true and honest position on the record about these important issues that are facing your community. Now, beyond that, beyond just getting answers from the candidates, I also recommend that you reach out to organizations and even media outlets in your community that are hosting debates for an election. Let the local newspaper or TV station that is hosting a debate, assuming that your candidates are even willing to engage in debates in the election, hopefully they are, but that's becoming increasingly rare. Let them know about this questionnaire and the answers that the candidate submitted. And members of your organization, your community, your neighbors, your friends, your comrades should also reach out to those community organizations and media outlets and say, hey, I want you to know that we have this questionnaire about these issues that are important to us. We encourage you to ask the candidates about this in the debate that you're hosting. And it's a way of getting the issue, again, on the record, highlighting it for other people in your community who aren't aware of them. And I also want you to think about this as a kind of a structure test. So your ability to get candidates on the record to answer this questionnaire or a questionnaire like it, it's a test of your organization or your community or neighborhood's capacity to reach out to aspiring elected officials or incumbent elected officials in an organized way. And if you're unable to effectively reach out to candidates and put this questionnaire in front of them, that might be a signal of what your prospects are going to be when they're actually elected and in office, and you're trying to get them to consider actual legislation for community land trusts or for facilitating worker cooperatives. It's a test and a way to strengthen your community and your own capacity as an organizer. Now, the questionnaire itself is in stages on the actual website. So I'm going to go into the back end to show you just how it's laid out. The topics are really what Margaret already covered. So I'm not going to dive into them too much again, but I'll just give you the kind of bare bones structure, because you might want to develop your own candidate questionnaire, like I said, either to go deeper on one of these issues or maybe on a completely different set of issues. But if you share our concerns about public banking, community land trusts, energy democracy, participatory budgeting, support for worker-owned co-ops, then I would strongly encourage, and I would feel very grateful if you would circulate this candidate questionnaire as an ongoing experiment in the radical potential of this tool and attempting to radicalize and democratize our elections. As I mentioned, this is a straightforward Google form. It's not super technically involved, and we just break it up into sections. There's a short preamble. We state a broad issue. We talk, a lot of this is couched in terms of the pandemic and how the pandemic exacerbated a lot of the injustices that we're attempting to ameliorate or even eradicate with these non-reformist reforms. And then after that short explanation and some bullet points about why we believe, for example, co-ops are part of the solution, we give them an open field to answer in long form, but it's a very pointed question. Do you support policies that would promote and strengthen the development of worker co-ops, e.g. a favorable tax, procurement policies, investment funds, training, research? And then they have their say. And then we move on to the next section: housing, community land trusts, energy democracy, public banking, participatory budgeting, universal basic income. That's a new addition to the questionnaire, and so we're excited about that. And then we include some references if their campaign would like to engage in some further reading. And then we have a comprehensive campaign information section so that if for whatever reason we needed to reach out to the campaign, and also probably more importantly, when their answers are published, that we ensure that campaign contact information and the campaign information is correct. And so I'm going to go into the timeline about when it would be good to circulate these. So in many cases, so for example, in New York, our congressional primary is June 28th. So I would recommend if your primary for Congress or for other offices is June 28th or late June, now is actually a great time to be distributing this questionnaire to the candidates who are running in the primary, because you want to get the questionnaire to the candidates a little bit over 2 months before Election Day, because that gives them a few weeks to get it back to us, and then that gives us a few weeks to have it published and available for you to then circulate those answers among your community, among constituents who are interested in that election. So you want to be working with a fair amount of lead time. Now for the general election, that's November 8th this year. And if we think about early voting starting as early as, say, mid-October, then I would say that you want to distribute this questionnaire to the candidates running in the general election by first week of September, so September 6th. We set a deadline for responses for September 20th. That gives us until October 4th to publish the results, and then the results are up and online for a couple weeks before early voting starts in mid to late October. So again, you still have some time to distribute this for primaries, get it in front of folks, I would say, before the end of the month, and then for the general election, I'd say by the end of the first week of September, so that we make sure we have enough answers. If they fill out the questionnaire but we don't get it to voters in time, then that that kind of defeats the purpose. So at this point, I will turn over the podium, and I'm happy to take your questions later, to Peter Schwartzman, who is our actually elected eco-socialist mayor. Yeah, it's my honor to introduce Mayor Peter Schwartzman in Galesburg, Illinois. Take it away, Peter.
Thank you, Michael. Really appreciate it. I want to just say that I'm really honored to be a part of this summit. The events I've been able to go to have been really eye-opening, and it's a fantastic group of people doing some amazing things, and we have to keep that in mind as we push forward. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides. Okay, so that's a little bit about who I am. My primary job is professor of environmental studies at Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. And hold on, I'm having a little bit of difficulty with moving things around. Okay.
And Peter, while you're moving things around, if you click the share at the top, I think that there you go. It'll get bigger for us.
There we go.
Thank you.
We're good. So I'm here to talk a little bit about my work as mayor. My background on Galesburg, just so people know, it's a city of 30,000, West Central Illinois. We have a manager council form of government, which essentially means that as mayor, I'm not the boss, but I play a critical role in the city. The city manager, I'll have more to say about that, is essentially the boss that is hired by the council. I never planned to be a politician, but I got involved in community matters, and that said it all. But I had two wonderful, beautiful girls, and I wanted to make my community better. Got involved. I tried to recruit people to run for office and wasn't able to do that. So I looked in the mirror and decided I had to run. That was 2011. So I became a city councilor by knocking on doors and getting the word out that I was just a concerned citizen that wanted to listen and move things forward. I served 10 years, and then last year I ran for the mayor's race and won against a conservative incumbent who was seeking a third term. I'm now sitting in my 11th month and 20 days in office. I can tell you, I could talk at length about this. A year ago now, today, we had a council with probably 5 or 6 members supportive of that mayor. I'm now the mayor, and I would say at least 4 of the 7 councilors are favorable to me. So there's been a complete sea change in Galesburg. And that's not only reflects things going on in the city, but also I think has opened people's eyes to what's potentially possible in our society. So I'm framing this as people are more important than business. And I think that fits within the structure of our topic today. So I'm going to just share with you a few ideas that I've been trying to pursue in my community. Some have already occurred. Some are still in the infant stage. This is not meant to be a all-inclusive list. And frankly, I'm all about ideas. So as more people have ideas about how we can put these ideas in practice, I want to know. I'd love to know, and I'd love to share. And if there are other progressive mayors in the United States, please share their names with me. And if you have contact with them, I'd love to dialogue with them on a more regular basis. So the first decision the council made in December, probably starting in November of last year, we've had a warming shelter, but it was literally in the police station, and it wasn't really, had no beds, had no place for people to sleep. It also was not conducive for agencies to bring food or blankets or other hygienic products. So we decided to invest in a warming shelter that was offsite, and we worked with a local organization to facilitate that. I think it's really important to see where this fits in our topic. So by creating such a shelter and upping the opportunities for it, we destigmatized and humanized the homeless. And that's, I think, a critically important step that needs to be made in every community. When we did this, of course, well, where are we going to put this? And so we're combating NIMBY, this idea that there are places that homeless or unhoused don't live. And we live in a city that's probably 15 square miles. So frankly, you could walk from one corner to the other in about probably an hour. There is no other, there is no outside. And I think that's a really important component to this work is pulling people together to recognize that they're part of the city, everyone. And there is no backyard that is not part of the commons. It also helps us to expand the concept of community, and that there was some dialogue around this. Who are the homeless? And the idea, especially given our economic situation, any one of us could be homeless or unhoused at any moment. And I want to also elaborate. I haven't heard this term used much, but I think this notion of care economy. We have the monetary economy, but I think to ensure our stability and our resilience as a species, we need to really push forward this notion that we need a stronger care economy. And so this shelter clearly is a way to contribute to that. The next initiative that I've really been pushing from day one is creating a big community center. We had a small one that was sold to the richest man in town for practically nothing about 8 years ago. He turned it into a brewery, or his son did, and therefore there is no community center. We also had a nonprofit run community center that was primarily serving the African-American community in our city. It burned down 6 years ago and nothing was done about it. There was no talk of replacing it. The city didn't step up, didn't think about it, didn't make any efforts. So we are in a very prime situation to put forward the notion of what a community center can be. And when I say big, I'm talking about something that can serve all of our needs. A place where anyone in our city can go and get what they need, whether that's food, whether that's hygienic products, whether that's some socialization, whether that's a blanket, whether that's a connection to some mental health care. Those are all things. Some people refer to this as one-stop shop. And I think we need to really embrace this concept that there should be a place in every community where this can happen. I think one of the foundational pieces of this is that it demystifies the perceived limits and responsibilities of government. We have a really strong movement afoot that says that government, should do the minimal, right? That, we have some say government basically to build roads and provide military and police support. I think people in this room recognize we need to look beyond that and recognize that the city has a lot of other responsibilities and powers as articulated even with the land trust concept. Another thing that we look at is revenue losses. A lot of the critics in our community are talking about, well, this center is going to be a net loss. It's going to be operationally going to be, maybe up to $500,000 a year. How can we afford that? And how can we keep losing money in our community? And I would argue, no, that's the wrong way of framing it. In fact, these are investments. These are essential investments in our community. There's no such thing as losing money when you're supporting the basic needs of our community members. And lastly, really importantly, a lot of our youth across the spectrum, right, have felt and feel, outside of the political process, feel they have no voice. They're further displaced emotionally by COVID. So we reformed our youth commission. It now has 7 youth members and 4 adults, and it's working to improve their voice in our community. And we really want them to be a part of establishing this community center, which is going to serve them as much as any other demographic. Another thing that I'm trying to do is get volunteers more active in our community, and specifically the physical and social projects that can help everyone. Let me speak about that. First of all, we created a position in our city called a special projects coordinator. And that person is, and all of us have a person like this or multiple people in our cities who really want to get stuff done. They're frustrated by the fact that government is so slow. They're frustrated by the fact that there's just not, the care economy isn't strong enough. And so they want to get things done. They want to paint hydrants. They want to plant trees. They want to fix sidewalks. They want to remove signs. They want to, cook meals. So we created that position. And I think that's a really important thing to think about as a community. What can these people do, these volunteers? They can improve the parks and plant trees throughout the city. And that's something I think everybody wants. And it allows people to get outside of their silos. We're just beginning this concept, Help Thy Neighbor projects. COVID has certainly often created boxes where people stay in their houses. They may know their friends, but they don't know anyone else. And Help Thy Neighbor is a way to help people in need, whether it be they're mowing their lawns because they have some difficulty with that, or picking up their mail, or taking care of their pets, or babysitting. Some people have, in some framing, this is called, they've done this through called time banks. This is something I actually launched in Galesburg about 6 years ago, but it didn't take on in the way I wanted. But that's just something that keep in mind for what we're building. The idea is to have events and provide opportunities for people to get out of their silos and get into the big community. And what I think this really does is it increases personal connections and interconnections, and it creates vested interests. There's a lot of talk in our community about our youth who leave. And the question is, well, what are we giving them in their formative years to want to stay? And so I fully believe if they're given opportunities to do things in their community, they're gonna want to come back and see those things grow. I use the tree analogy a lot, but I think that it's really true. One of the more radical ideas that I've offered, and although I was elected a year ago, I haven't really pushed yet. I'm waiting for later this year to do this. You'll see in a minute why. But I think this is an idea that could be spread throughout the nation. Free lifeline water to every resident. We are fortunate in Galesburg. We own our water system, and therefore we set the rates. And so we can decide how, if we want to charge low rates for the first 1 or 2 units of water and higher rates for higher levels or not, right? We can decide that we can, sell water to people who are having, economic turmoil in their lives at a lower rate than we would to the average person. Many people are struggling. I'm sure everybody feels this in the communities that we serve. And this is a way we can relieve economic pressure by lowering the one resource bill that people have. We still have a moratorium on shutoffs. We started that in the summer of 2020. I'm very proud of that, in fact. But what we've obviously seen is there's a lot of unpaid bills over that time, and we're now trying to reconcile how we can deal with that. One way is to initiate this type of program looking forward. I think it's really important. I mean, water is obviously an essential resource. I mean, we are physically about 70% water, our bodies. And so if that doesn't clarify the need for it, then I don't know what does. But to expand human rights to include basic water, I think that's something that should be understood and it should be clarified. And as water becomes a more contested resource around the world with climate change and such, I think it's even more essential to establish this now, so that when cities and regions become more water stressed, that this still becomes a basic value that they carry forth. I also just refer back to this care economy. I think the whole care economy should include water as a commons, and this is a way to do that. So those are some of the things that I've shared and want to continue doing. I'm open to more ideas, but here's a call. Our city manager is leaving. He's got about another 20 days. And then we are undergoing a national search for replacement. And we have a firm that's going to assist us in that process. They're going to vet some of the applications, but we have a council of 7, and I would argue 4 of them I would classify as progressive, and they want to see people from different backgrounds, different experiences. So I need your help to recruit progressive minds to Galesburg. I think it's an amazing opportunity for someone to join a city that's on the move and really move forward with a lot of the initiatives that I've shared here and others that I haven't had a chance to speak about. We have about 40 days before we close applications. The application is not yet available. Our council's meeting Tuesday to sort of finalize what we want in such a candidate, and then the applications will go out. So please contact me ASAP, send this out, let people know, put it on your social media. The more applications we can get, the more progressive candidates we can get, the more likely we'll hire someone like that. And I think that would do wonders not only for Galesburg, but it might actually allow Galesburg to be a model for how a small city can run in this new century. Lastly, I just want to thank you for being you. I think sometimes we forget, but certainly the people in this room are a huge source of inspiration for all humanity and all forms of life. And I think and Earth Day was yesterday, but every day is Earth Day. So we should take pride in the work we're doing and recognize, as much as we're inspired by each other, we are ourselves inspirations. Thank you. I'm trying to unshare. Yeah, there we go. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Schwartzman. I'm just adding Margaret back to the spotlight, and also David. And so at this point, I think we open it up to questions. Margaret or Peter, were there any questions that you saw in the chat that came up, or anything you saw in the chat that made you want to maybe follow up on, yeah, something that you saw in the chat you'd like to follow up on regarding your presentation?
Yeah, thanks. The first thing is, if anybody wants the PowerPoint, it was actually a smaller version of a PowerPoint I did a couple months ago about community land trusts in New York. Just email me, and it's Margaret Kimberley at Gmail. Just my name at one word at Gmail. And I am happy to send the full presentation to anyone who wants it. I had a question, but someone pointed out the some names of some CLTs in the Bronx, which is very important, and deed restrictions. Somebody asked, can a municipality insert deed restrictions on land without CLTs? I believe they can. There are a variety. I'm not well versed in that particularly, but I believe they can. Someone pointed out, good comments, that the federal government provides funding for all kinds of for luxury housing here in New York. Developers, they get money if they set aside a certain percentage of apartments to low-income people, and I guess that's a good thing. But it certainly isn't enough. It doesn't undo the inequities which I discussed, where distressed properties are just handed over to them. So that's not a good solution, I don't believe. So we have to, let's see. Someone, oh, that was candid questionnaire. I think I got, let's see, someone caught somebody else up on what was going on. Unless did I miss anybody's question? If somebody wants to put it in, I'd be happy to answer. But I can't see a question, which doesn't mean it's not there, but I'm gonna pay closer attention now. So if anybody has a question, I can answer. Thank you.
So there was a question about how people can help me, and I really appreciate that. And I'll say two things. First of all, Galesburg's city council meetings are streamed online, and there are increasing numbers of people who are watching them. It's actually quite interesting, the dynamic that is playing out in Galesburg. I mean, I think it'd make for a great reality TV show. And it might actually move us forward as a society, as opposed to most of the reality shows that are on. But I don't have those networks to create that. So it's entertaining at most. So better watch this than watch, the crap that's usually on. But what I'm saying there is, at those meetings you'll see that people are writing letters to the editor. People are on social media speaking to issues about the community center. And of course, naysayers I guess, feel more empowered to speak. They're more emboldened in our society right now. And so, the reasons why we don't need a community center, it's too expensive, we can't afford it, let the parents do the work. Those kinds of attitudes are promulgating throughout our social media space. And the alternative vision that we have in this room needs to be aired. We need to change the how people are thinking about these things, and recognize that government really has municipal government in particular is as close to the people as we're going to find, and it really can make change. I would also say, like one of my opening comments, I said, I didn't expect to be a politician. And in fact, I wasn't even going to run for mayor until a little birdie came by, and said me, "Oh, are you thinking of running for mayor?" And I say that to say that if you know someone in your community that would make a good leader, or would be willing to step up, they might need a little nudge. They may need that little extra effort, extra support, and say, "Look, if you run, I'll help you. I'll go knock doors with you," and that might compel somebody to do it. And I think it takes that. And I would lastly say that we are at a very critical juncture. I think all the things that are going on in this conference illustrate that. And now's the time to step up, right? Now's the time. This is our time. Plain and simple. So further delay in action is not going to get us where we need to go. People are, especially young people, but I think more people than we recognize, are wanting something different. They want community. They want socialization. They want everyone to have. And we, the people in this room, looks like 54 of us, are those people that are going to kind of make that happen. And if it's not us, for whatever reason, we don't feel we can be that spokesperson, then find somebody in your community who you trust and you're willing to push forward, and encourage them and support them.
I think what we've been describing here, and with initiatives like the Solidarity Economy questionnaire, it's the seeds of a solidarity economy version of ALEC, ALEC. This was one of those reactionary right-wing boogie men that kind of sprang up or became better known in the 2000s. It was the I can never remember, American Legislative Exchange Council, and they are the corporate power structure jerks who come up with the model legislation for everything from privatizing public schools to reactionary legislation to further oppress women's reproductive rights, or it wouldn't surprise me if a lot of the anti-trans bills that we've seen in state legislatures are a product of ALEC or influenced by similar groups. But they, most of us, like, we come to our activism and our movement work through our local experience and through local fights, and that is necessary and important. But I think it also can lead to a kind of a fractured view of, like, we're so focused on what's going on in our town or our county. We would benefit from having a group or a network that is looking at all these different fights and all these different solutions and how they can broadly apply to so many areas, and provide model legislation for non-reformist reforms like we've been talking about, and issues that you've been talking about throughout this decolonizing economics conference. And so it's a lot of what this comes down to is just getting the ideas into the language that is considered acceptable by the legislatures and by these offices. And if we have time during Q&A, I would love for Mayor Peter to talk a little bit about what he wishes activists knew about how city councils work, how to understand and be literate of a city council meeting and city council agendas and city council minutes, how to present what you're trying to do, whether it's getting a pothole filled or getting a community lands trust established, in such a way that it isn't immediately dismissed by the group, whether it's the city council or whatever, because it's not in the right format, it's not using the right form, that kind of thing, from your experience both as a city council member and now as mayor. But I've been talking for a bit, so I want to get back to questions from the group. and I see that Margaret, oh, has a question for me. Well, thank you, Margaret.
Yeah.
Okay. Would it be helpful to present it not only to candidates, but also those already in office? Yeah, I think that it's a good idea to, at the very least, let incumbents know that you've been circulating this. And if you know that an incumbent has endorsed someone who's answered the questionnaire or has a connection to the person who answered the questionnaire, that's an in. I think any excuse to put yourself in front of an elected official as someone who is informed and engaged and is creating some juice in the community, at the very least, you're banking a little bit of credibility, but maybe more of a threat, so that the next time you go to that person or you ask to have a meeting with them about whatever it is that you and your community are working on, that they remember you, like, oh, this is someone who's out there who's doing things. This is someone who I probably shouldn't dismiss. Now, is it wrong that that's the political calculus that a politician engages in when they're deciding whether or not they're going to just meet with someone? Of course it is, right? But that is the political landscape that we deal with. And so to the extent that you can leverage it for your community, I encourage it.
Yeah, because I was just thinking about how, we have these bills proposed in New York City Council and in New York State for public banking, for community land trusts, and often they languish because they don't have the support of the moneyed interests because they're antithetical to their interests. So I was just thinking about a way to, especially for incumbents, lest we forget, they run again and again and again, if they can. We have term limits in the city council, but not in the state legislature, or they recycle, they leave the city council and then run for an assembly seat or whatever. So I think it would be good if we kept these issues in front of them. So the next time a public banking bill is proposed, that we make sure they know that there are people who support it. That was my thought. But I also had a question for Peter, unless, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of anybody. Can I say Mayor Pete?
I'm Peter, not Pete. We already have a Mayor Pete.
Okay, Mayor Peter.
And he's not one of us.
Touche, yes. I was just wondering about, how to be supportive of you all over the country. Obviously, of course, you can always, support with the campaign contribution. That's important to know. But if there's some way that we could share with people, especially being a Green, because I hear people say incorrectly, of course, Greens should run for public office because we get press attention in presidential elections, usually negative and inaccurate attention. And I always say, no, there are Greens running all over the country. So I'm just wondering, is there a way to connect? Do you video your council meetings or anything that you could share? And that would, I think, would be a way to lift up the Green Party to get greater public attention and to be helpful to you.
Yeah, I'm available. I'll interview anywhere on Zoom, on radio. My father and I wrote this amazing book, I believe, called The Earth Is Not for Sale. And right before COVID hit, and I haven't been interviewed, I would say, once for it, anywhere. And I think that's not uncommon for people who write books. Margaret, you write all these wonderful essays, and everyone I read is really provocative, and you deserve a lot more attention for the work you're doing in that area. And I think sometimes people just don't know that they should recommend that to their local radio station, maybe a university radio station, or something in the public domain. We got to get the word out, right? The people who have, I think, the message of the future are, as you indicated, are not provided a space. And we're willing, and I'm not looking to get paid to do that. I'm willing to do it for free, right? That's the whole point. And we got to get these messages out. We have to change, we have to normalize the positive future that we envision, and move away from all the nonsense that we hear all the time. The mainstream media is there to scare us to death. And we have to share a different vision. And I think people want that vision, but they don't know where to find it. So and I'll help. I'll be on panels. I mean, I'm sure you will be. We're all very busy, but as far as what's important in my life, your life, we need to get this message out. And if people want to work with me and they want to be advised, if there's an opportunity I've had several people volunteer to kind of do some historiography of the campaign and some of the success stories. And, I don't have a budget for that. So it has to be voluntary, and it hasn't panned out. People are too busy, and there's a lot of other things going on. And it's not just about me at all. It really isn't. Those who know me know that it's not about me at all. But I think communities like Galesburg are at the right size and scope and scale that we can really make change. And I would just add, I haven't talked anything about renewable energy. Galesburg is launching into the renewable energy age in a way that is unbelievable. It's hard to even describe, and it gets almost no attention at all, zero. And even locally. So that's a whole nother framework. Galesburg I didn't talk about this, urban agriculture. We got $250,000 for the next 3 years to support new startups in minority businesses and urban agriculture in a city of our size. That should be nationally projected, right? That's what cities should be doing with their ARPA money, among other things.
And spell out ARPA for us, the acronym?
It's an acronym, American Rescue Plan? I might have it wrong.
That sounds right. Yeah, American Rescue Plan Act. Yeah.
Recovery plan. But we got $4 million. Our county got $9 million. This is true throughout the United States. There's money there that could be utilized, and communities have a right to spend it pretty much how they want. And most people are not aware that it's there. So we took the initiative to, among other things, to support this type of venture. And it's opening people's eyes locally, but it's something that should be promoted nationally, right? We have money. On my next book, if anybody in this group wants to work with me, I came with a title, Yes, We Have the Money. Okay, that's the book title. And I'm not an economist, but I can tell you from my political work, we have the money. It's a question of where it goes. And so all of the naysayers who talk about we have no money, this, that, and the other thing, their whole austerity program has been dominating the global map for too long. And we have to completely abolish that and recognize we do have the money, and we have the energy, and we have the human spirit, and we have the intelligence, and I can go on and on.
So Peter, that government grants are exactly the kind of navigation of the boring yet powerful halls of power that I was kind of touching on earlier, in terms of what do you advise to folks who are who are actually trying to dig into municipal governance for the first time. And one of our comrades on the interim steering committee of the Green Eco Socialist Network, Mel Figueroa, she is a 20th level government grant wizard, and I wish Mel was here to answer that. But that, there's always at least some money around, right? And the way that you access that money is by navigating the privileged discourse of knowing that the grants exist, and knowing the deadlines, knowing which form to fill out, and who to send it to, and how to what do you recommend to folks, either for that, or whether it's bringing something to your city council to become more literate in this aspect of actually existing governance? Because we have to engage them on their terms, at least as part of what we do, right? the radical street theater in front of City Hall or whatever, like that's stuff that I think a lot of activists get steeped in from in a lot of what gets publicized in the media. It's the slow, boring work that can make a big impact that I think is less well known. And I mean, that's
Well,
to Margaret or Peter. I mean,
yeah.
whoever has.
I'll defer to Margaret to
No,
start.
sorry, I was fooling around here.
Oh,
That's
that's
okay.
fine. I'll pick, it's hard to, yeah, we're trying to
Go
read all
ahead.
the comments and try to create our own answers. I'll tell you, I mean, go to a council meeting. When there's an opportunity to speak, go up to the podium. Bring a friend, because it even the way the podium and the dais is set up, it's usually, you know, they're above you and it's intimidating. But you have a right as a citizen to ask basic questions. What are we doing with the ARPA money? How much do we get?
Yep.
What are the ideas? Has there been a public forum to solicit ideas for how that should be spent? These are basic questions. And those folks should be accountable to explain them to you. And that's at the county level and at the city level.
Yeah, you know, this money has been used for all sorts of, used for police, used to Alabama, and now they're building prisons with the COVID money, this money that was supposed to restore the economy and make everyone whole. It's being used for terrible purposes. But I just want to amplify what you said, Peter, about participating civically. It could be a city council, it could be you know, write a letter if you can't, or send an email to your local representative about something, because they count on people being disengaged. They count on people too often being uninformed, and that's what keeps the things that we've been talking about from happening.
So
Well, I can also say,
if I could just say, Peter, so like I'm kind of a tips and tricks guy. I'm like, you know, what's the 3 bullet points? So I'm hearing from Peter and Margaret, go to a city council meeting if you've never been to one before, and come with a question in mind. Look at the website for the city council ahead of time to ensure that there is a Q&A comment period, right? And what time that comes to, right? And then maybe for bonus points, call ahead to the city clerk or whatever to see if there's anything you need to do, like submit a question ahead of time or put your name on a list, that kind of thing. And just understand, in my experience, it's like, try not to get too frustrated with how opaque the process can be. Because you go in thinking like, hey, this is our government, right? And so it should be super accessible. And you know, it frequently makes the customer service support line of your local cable provider seem benevolent and warm and welcoming by comparison. But that's what we have to navigate to interject some of these non-reformist reforms we've been talking about. Margaret, you were going to say, or Peter, or I lost track.
I think two quick things. One, look at your council, find out who they are, find out what they've said or done that might be construed as progressive, and show your support for that. Like, reach out to them and say, look, I really think it's a great idea.
Yeah, you know, we can't pass up opportunities to do these things. They, you know, many times elected officials, they'll have a meet their constituents day or something, even if it's not an official meeting. Show up, make sure you show up occasionally and have questions for them. You know, the squeaky wheel does get the grease, and disengagement is our enemy, and it helps all these forces whose needs are antithetical to ours. It helps them have a bigger voice than if they don't know what we're thinking and what we want, what our communities want.
And one other thing I think it speaks to, so in our community about 6 months ago, we were going to close our public pool, that's just like 80 years old. And it's because we deferred maintenance. It got to the point where it's too expensive to fix. And the council was ready just to say, there was not even with our progressive council, by and large, was just ready to give it away because that's what the city manager thought was the best thing to do. Well, guess what happened? A few members of that pool started coming to the meetings and like regularly. And then that grew to more people. And then they had a campaign, and then they had yard signs, and then they got a petition signed. 1,200 people signed the petition. And guess what? We're going to save the pool. And what I feel is so important about that is to acknowledge the power of the people. You know, to me, the pool is important. Is it the most important thing in our community? No, it's not. But is it important? Yes. And why is it important? Because the people think it's important. And by giving them power, it emancipates other people to have power. And so I'm seeing more people come to the council meetings. I'm seeing more people voicing their dreams. And it's what we call a virtuous cycle. We have to create virtuous cycles in our society, not vicious ones.
Right. In politics, there are a few things more dangerous than a good example. And so just the exercise of saving the pool demonstrates to people what their power is and how to enact that power again on a different issue. It's a structure test, right? It's a way of testing and strengthening your constituency's capacities. I think we're coming up on time here in a couple minutes. Was there any business to be covered from the conference planners before the next session?
I will invite y'all to do a closing thought. This is David Cobb, a disembodied voice. And then after you do so, there was some request in the chat. I'm going to stop the recording and then just let this folks have a conversation amongst yourselves. I don't have capacity to facilitate anything, but it'll just be an open forum for we can unmute folks and you can have a conversation together.
Great. Well, for those watching the recording, thank you for watching. And you can learn more about the Green Eco-Socialist Network at eco-socialism.org. And we look forward to seeing you online and in the streets.
Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
Mayor Pete, you're going to have the last word.
Oh, I'm thanking people via text. Some of you reached out. I couldn't get all the messages, but please contact me. I'd love to further dialogue with you. Keep up the great work you all doing, and let's reconvene in a year and celebrate all of our accomplishments.